Well, hey there, idiots. Welcome back to Observe. In today's video, we're going to be analyzing the nonverbal communication of Casey Anthony again. She has recently returned to social media. More on that in just a second. Let's go ahead and roll the intro first. We interrupt this programming to go live to the scene where we are speaking to a really cool guy about doing really cool things. All right, thank you, Logan. Hi, cool guy. So, you were just talking about how you have supposedly leveled up from the rest of us normies. Would you like to maybe elaborate?
I'd like to give a shout out to my homies. It's been a really good day for me today. Yeah, so I was just gonna go.
Yes, okay, right. So, as I was saying, cool guy, what just makes you so cool?
Dude, bruh, it is all of the crazy flavor that I have been having.
It's the flavor you're having. Do you want to maybe elaborate a little bit on that?
Heck yes, bro. Am I right, you know? Yeah, I'm pretty cool. It's my fume, bro. It's only the coolest, most radical, slickest thing that I have ever been cool with myself. It has this really nice rubbery tip to it. It has these clicky parts so I can fidget with it. And frankly, it looks pretty cool in my humble, but probably correct opinion. It's all clean air, so I can use it anywhere I like. I can use it on an airplane, I can use it in the DMV, I could use it at the library, or even like while I'm walking or sitting, which is cool. I find that to be pretty cool myself. It fits really good on its little stand that it comes with. It fits in my fingers, it fits in my mouth. You know, now that I think of it, it could probably also fit down. Okay, let's go ahead and cut to a commercial break real quick here, yeah.
Introducing Fume, an award-winning flavored air device that brings flavor to your mouth, not your lungs. It fills the void that ditching a bad habit can leave and is 100% nicotine, vapor, and smoke-free, allowing you to take it anywhere, at any time. Designed without the need for batteries or power, you can pick it up and go whenever you want. And its wide variety of flavors ensures that you will be able to find the perfect flavor match for you. Fume, a healthy alternative for healthier habits.
All right, you can't do that on camera. That's pretty inappropriate. So if you could try not to be so weird. Hi, hey, welcome back. I'm here with the very cool guy. So, tell me, cool guy, is there anything that you would like to say to the viewers before we go?
What is up, my homies? It's cool guy coming to you live, and I thought that everyone here was cool, but as it turns out, they're not. All I wanted to do was try to take my fume and stick it.
Okay, now back to you in studio, Logan. All right. Well, there you have it, folks. If you would also like to be a very cool guy, go to tryfume.com/observe or scan the QR code. Use code OBSERVE and you'll get a free Fume topper when you order the Journey Pack today. Thank you again to Fume for sponsoring this video, and now back to your regularly scheduled programming. All right, so it's been a minute since I've been able to touch the Anthony case, so if you would like to be able to go and watch the other videos that I have done on this, it will help provide some context to you, especially non-verbally. I've done the best I can to create a synopsis of the case that should be able to fit pretty well here in this video, but there is a bit to be able to go through, so go ahead and buckle up and let's go ahead and begin on this backstory. From the moment that Kaylee was reported missing, law enforcement pored over Casey's accounts and evidence from the Anthony home. Detectives quickly discovered that Zenaida, or Zanny Fernandez Gonzalez, the nanny that Casey blamed, did not in fact exist. The apartment Casey pointed out as Zanny's was vacant. The mutual friends who supposedly introduced Casey to Zanny, well, they hadn't seen Casey in years. Even Casey's claim of a frantic phone call from Kaylee on July 15th actually turned out to be pure fiction. Investigators later charged Anthony with 4 misdemeanor counts of providing false information to police officers, pinpointing those specific lies about her employment at Universal Studios, leaving Kaylee with Zanny, telling 2 co-workers about Kaylee's disappearance, and receiving that phantom phone call. Casey was convicted on all 4 counts at trial, underscoring how extensively she had misled the authorities during the crucial first day of the investigation. Meanwhile, forensic evidence mounted. A hair recovered from Casey's car trunk showed root banding, a decomposition pattern indicating it came from a dead body, according to an FBI analyst. Cadaver dogs had signaled near Kaylee's playhouse in the backyard and in Casey's trunk, reinforcing suspicions. Investigators also uncovered internet searches on the family's computer for terms like chloroform, neck breaking, and even how to make weapons out of household products conducted in the spring before Kaylee's death. In fact, FBI labs confirmed traces of chloroform in the car trunk, though defense experts hotly disputed how much was actually there. A prominent stain in the trunk, that unforgettable odor likened by Cindy Anthony, the mother, to a dead body, added to the circumstantial case that Kaylee's lifeless body had been in that car. By October of 2008, the evidence was grim enough that Florida prosecutors charged Casey with first-degree murder, aggravated child abuse, and manslaughter, on top of the lying charges that she had already received. She pleaded not guilty, and given the severe accusations, the state initially announced it would seek the death penalty. The stage was set for a trial that would consume the nation's attention. Casey Anthony's murder trial began in May of 2011 in Orlando. From day one, it was clear that this case would be a battle of narratives as much as facts. Prosecutor Linda Drain Burdick painted Casey as a party-loving, fundamentally selfish young mother who murdered Kaylee to live the good life free of parental responsibility. In a compelling opening statement, Burdick described how Casey went clubbing, entered hot body contests, got a tattoo reading Bella Vita or Beautiful Life, all during the very weeks that her little girl was supposedly missing. To the prosecution, these were the actions of a guilty woman without remorse, not a grieving mother searching for her child. They argued Kaylee died on June 16th of 2008, the last day she was seen alive by anyone besides Casey, and that Casey suffocated her with duct tape and dumped the body in the woods. The defense, however, led by attorney Jose Baez, offered a shockingly different counter-narrative. Kaylee Anthony's death was a tragic accident, not a murder at all. In his opening, Baez claimed that Kaylee accidentally drowned in the Anthony family's backyard pool on June 16th. Panicked, Casey and her father George allegedly covered up the death. Baez even suggested that George Anthony, a former police officer, helped dispose of Kaylee's body and coached Casey to lie, a theory that George vehemently denied under oath. The defense also dropped another bombshell. They asserted that George had actually abused Casey as a child, warping her sense of truth and teaching her to conceal pain with lies. This claim, unsupported by direct evidence, aimed to explain Casey's seemingly bizarre behavior and pathological lying as the result of trauma, not malice. Over 6 weeks, jurors heard from roughly 90 witnesses and saw hundreds of pieces of evidence. They listened to detectives recount how Casey lied effortlessly, leading them on a wild goose chase to Universal Studios, where on July 16th, 2008, she finally admitted, "I don't really work there," after taking officers on a futile stroll through the halls. They heard forensic experts for the state testify about the smell of human decay in the car, the chloroform traces, and a heart-shaped sticker residue found on a piece of duct tape that had been stuck to Kaylee's skull. A medical examiner told the jury her autopsy ruled Kaylee's death as a homicide, though she admitted under cross-examination that the exact cause was undetermined. No singular smoking gun emerged. There were no eyewitnesses, no DNA directly tying Casey to the remains, and no confession. It was purely a circumstantial case, albeit a pretty powerful one. Bays, for his part, worked to undermine the prosecution at every single turn he could. He called his own experts in who challenged the chloroform findings, saying that the chemical traces weren't nearly as dramatic as the state claimed. World-renowned forensic pathologist Dr. Werner Spitz testified that the duct tape may have been an afterthought placed on Kaylee's skull after decomposition, perhaps to keep the jaw intact when moving the remains. The defense poked holes in the FBI lab work on the hair strand and questioned the new science behind air tests that indicate decomposition in the car trunk. They emphasized that no cause of death could be confirmed, arguing that reasonable doubt abounded. Both sides' closing arguments encapsulated their radically different theories. Prosecutors hammered Casey's pattern of lies and partying. They played jailhouse recordings and phone calls to show how little Casey showed concern for Kaylee in the weeks she was supposedly missing, never mentioning fear for her daughter's safety, even once. They reminded jurors that Casey led friends and family through an intricate web of excuses at various times, claiming Kaylee was with different babysitters or friends, or that she and Kaylee were spending time in Jacksonville or at theme parks. All of these stories were false. The state argued these were intentional, calculated lies by a woman who wanted to avoid responsibility, first for a missing child and then later for a murder. The defense countered by attacking the evidence as insufficient and fantasy forensics. Jose accused the prosecution of building a bizarre tale with no direct proof of how Kaylee actually died, let alone that Casey killed her. He reminded the jury that Casey's lies, while reprehensible, were not proof of murder. Bays suggested that Casey lied out of panic, noting again the allegations of sexual abuse, and urged jurors to not mistake weird behavior for homicide. He seized on the lack of fingerprints or DNA on the duct tape and the absence of any witness who saw Casey harm Kaylee. And he stressed that George Anthony's actions were also suspicious, pointing out that George had attempted suicide in January of 2009 after Kaylee's remains were found, leaving a note expressing guilt and love for his lost granddaughter. Though George said it was grief and not guilt that actually drove him to write that note. Throughout the case, one constant theme was Casey's troubled relationship with the truth. The trial showcased several high-profile lies Casey told. Casey's most infamous lie was that a babysitter, Zenaida Fernandez-Gonzalez, had run off with the 2-year-old Kaylee. She stuck to this story from July 15th, 2008, even swearing in a written statement that she dropped Kaylee at the nanny's apartment and that this mystery woman had vanished with the child. Police confirmed within days that no such nanny had ever cared for Kaylee or possibly even exist. An actual woman named Zenaida Gonzalez, who had never met Casey, later sued her for defamation. Casey pretended to have a job as an event planner at Universal Studio Orlando. On July 16, 2008, detectives invited her to lead them to her office there, and Casey took them through the Universal's gates into a building before finally admitting, with a little bit of a weak smile, that she was not actually employed there at all. She hadn't worked at Universal since 2006. This bizarre charade blew a huge hole in Casey's credibility from the get-go. Casey also told investigators that she had discussed Kaylee's disappearance with 2 co-workers named Jeff Hopkins and Juliette Lewis, implying these were people who could confirm her nanny story. In reality, Hopkins was an acquaintance from years before, and Juliette Lewis actually didn't exist at all. Casey had even claimed Juliette would babysit Kaylee on occasions. All of this was still deceit. On July 15th of 2008, as police were on the way, Casey told her mother and authorities that she received a phone call from Kaylee that afternoon that Kaylee was happy and talking about books. It was a desperate and cruel lie. Kaylee was already dead, and the phone records showed no such call had ever taken place. Prosecutors suggested that Casey invented this to buy one last day before the truth unraveled. In the month Kaylee was accounted for, Casey gave her parents a rotating carousel of explanations. She said Kaylee was with Zanny the nanny. Another time, Kaylee was at Busch Gardens on a supposed work trip with her. On different days, Casey claimed that she and Kaylee were staying in Jacksonville with a rich boyfriend or at a theme park outings with friends. While not actually criminal offenses, these lies provided context. Casey was frantically covering up Kaylee's death with any story that seemed to come to her mind. These falsehoods weren't just tabloid fodder either. They became evidence of consciousness of guilt. At trial, even Casey's own defense team admitted that she had lied about nearly everything except the claim that she hadn't killed her daughter. The 4 misdemeanor convictions for lying to law enforcement underscore how integral deception was to Casey's actions. On July 5th of 2011, the jury delivered a verdict that stunned millions. Casey Anthony was acquitted of all major charges. No murder, no manslaughter, no child abuse conviction. She was found guilty only of the 4 counts of lying to police, for which she later received the maximum sentence, 1 year each, to be served consecutively. But with credit for time served awaiting trial, Casey walked free on July 17th of 2017. As the county clerk read not guilty on the most serious counts, gasps rippled throughout the courtroom and well beyond. Casey Anthony, who many in the media had dubbed America's most hated mom, broke down in tears of relief. The public reaction was swift and intense outrage. Many who had followed every minute of the trial were largely convinced of Casey's guilt. Outside of the courthouse, crowds of protesters screamed justice for Kaylee, and some held signs with slogans like "Arrest the jury," a measure of how deeply the verdict actually shocked the people. In interviews, jurors later explained that their decision did not mean that they thought Casey was innocent. Rather, they felt the prosecution failed to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. One male juror told People magazine, "They gave us a lot of stuff that makes us think she probably did something wrong, but not beyond a reasonable doubt." He lamented that the state just didn't have a definitive case of death or enough hard evidence. Another juror told ABC News, "Just not enough to convict." Nonetheless, many members of the public who had not been sequestered for 6 weeks hearing all of the evidence fiercely disagreed, flooding social media and talk shows with anger. Casey's own parents, George and Cindy, left the courthouse in silence, looking stunned. The not guilty verdict sparked a broader discussion about the American justice system. Some saw it as a triumph of due process, a jury refusing to convict on emotion or suspicion alone. Others saw it as a miscarriage of justice, blaming the prosecution for overreaching or the jury for underappreciating the circumstantial evidence that did exist. Legal experts pointed out how Florida's sunshine laws, making most case documents public, and round-the-clock media coverage had turned Casey's trial into a spectacle, potentially influencing perceptions. The case became a staple in debates over trial by media and whether pervasive coverage helps or hinders justice. One immediate legacy of the public outcry was a push for new legislation. Observers were particularly enraged that Casey waited 31 days to report Kaylee missing, a delay that wasn't itself a crime. In the weeks after the verdict, lawmakers in several states and the federal level proposed Kaylee's Law, making it a felony for a parent or guardian to fail to promptly report a child as missing. By July 7th of 2011, just 2 days after acquittal, legislators in Florida, Oklahoma, New York, and West Virginia announced bills requiring parents to notify police quickly if a child disappears or dies under suspicious circumstances. An online petition on change.org gathered over 1.3 million signatures nationwide, and within a year, at least 11 states had enacted versions of Kaylee's law, though some civil liberties groups argued that such laws might lead to unintended consequences for grieving families. Whether viewed as justice delayed or reactionary populism, it showed how profound the public reaction was. The case didn't end with the verdict. It sparked a movement. Casey's life after the trial has been understandably fairly quiet and very controversial whenever she surfaces. Following her July 2011 release, Casey went into hiding in Florida, wary of death threats and public fury. In January of 2013, she resurfaced to file for bankruptcy, reporting nearly $800,000 in debt, largely in legal fees, and no income. During bankruptcy proceedings, it came out that she had been living off of the kindness of her legal team and a few benefactors. She avoided the spotlight, living in a modest fashion. She's got enough money to live, but not enough to really do anything. She's bored, a source told People magazine years later. Over time, Casey did a few interviews that made some waves. In March of 2017, nearly 9 years after Kaylee's death, Casey spoke to the Associated Press, the first time she addressed the case publicly since her acquittal. In that interview, she maintained her innocence, saying, "I don't know what happened to Kaylee. I'm okay with myself, I sleep pretty good at night," and insisted that she didn't give about what people thought of her. These comments reignited public ire as they struck many as flippant and unremorseful. Casey also acknowledged that understanding why people felt the way they did about her given the not guilty verdict was part of her life now. Relations with the Anthony family deteriorated. George and Cindy Anthony were deeply scarred by the saga. By 2018, a decade after Kaylee's disappearance, Casey was no longer on speaking terms with her parents. George Anthony, who nearly died in a severe car accident in 2018, told Dr. Oz that his relationship with Casey was irreparably broken, saying, "I can't trust her and I'd never feel comfortable around her." However, in a 2019 TV appearance, George said that he was ready to forgive Casey, a remarkable statement given the accusations she had leveled at him earlier on. Whether that forgiveness ever led to reconciliation remains unclear, but it signaled the complex, painful ties that remain between Casey and her family. In late 2020, Casey made headlines yet again for an unexpected reason. She filed paperwork in Florida to start a private investigation firm, despite not having a PI license. The company, apparently named Case Research and Consulting Services, LLC, was interpreted by some as Casey's attempt to reinvent herself as a champion for others falsely accused. A source told People magazine that Casey wanted to help other women get justice because she knows what it's like to be accused of something that she did not do. This venture was greeted with a vast amount of skepticism and did not seem to progress very far, especially since convicted felons can't really get a PI license in Florida. But it showed Casey's interest in legal matters hadn't waned. The most high-profile post-trial moment for Casey came in November of 2022 with the release of a Peacock streaming docuseries, Casey Anthony, Where the Truth Lies. In this 3-part documentary, including her first on-camera interviews, Casey repeated claims of her innocence and for the first time on camera directly accused her father, George, of orchestrating Kaylee's death. She theorized, with no evidence beyond her word, that George might have been abusing Kaylee and covered it all up by staging an accidental drowning. These allegations echoed her defense from 2011, but went even further, pinning blame on George. The docuseries reignited fierce debate trending on social media. Supporters said Casey finally got to tell her side of the story. Critics said it was an appalling exercise of deflection and an insult to Kaylee's memory. George Anthony, through his attorney, categorically denied all of Casey's claims as lies. Cindy Anthony, Kaylee's grandmother, says that she still doesn't know what to believe about that fateful day in 2008. Over a decade later, the Casey Anthony case continues to fascinate and infuriate. It's a story of a beautiful little girl gone far too soon, a young mother whose behavior left a nation in disbelief and outrage, and a criminal trial that became a media circus, ending in a verdict that many will never accept. Yet, it's also a reminder of the high burden of proof in our justice system. Even the most hated defendant is presumed innocent if the evidence doesn't erase every reasonable doubt. Casey Anthony's saga, from her month of lies to the courtroom fireworks between prosecution and defense to the backlash after she walked free, remains one of the 21st century's most riveting true crime dramas. And somewhere at its center is the tragedy of Caylee Anthony, the little girl whose name became known far and wide and whose loss led a reckoning far beyond the quiet Orlando street where she had lived and died. And so that is the backstory into this case. Casey Anthony is back. She's now on TikTok. She is taking a different role. And in this video, we will analyze the short footage that she has gone through to pick up any patterns that we have seen, especially from her prior footage. So again, if you haven't seen that, go and check that out. I think that is going to be enough of the chit chat. Let's go ahead and dive into the actual content itself.
Today is Saturday, March 1st, 2025. This is my first of probably many recordings on a series that I'm starting.
All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and pause here. Setting, she's sitting in her car. This doesn't feel like it's very planned, which is a fascinating decision to me. I would have found this fascinating regardless. I don't know that anybody wants Casey Anthony back on the internet, and she's back on the internet, much to everybody's dismay. But her decision to not have it be something that's more orchestrated or planned, or even it seems considered, is a fascinating decision. It could be pushing away from the fact that she might be trying to lie. If she prepped it a lot, perhaps there would be some deceit in there. But since it's not, it's difficult to say. So along with that, obviously there's no we're not seeing a whitewashing situation that we have seen in many other of these sorts of analyses. So that's neither here nor there. Now, non-verbally speaking, as she's saying that she's going to probably be back on the internet multiple times, that's the first time that she breaks eye contact. She does a little bit of a lip compression in there. So that breaking of eye contact, there's also a blink and a lip compression. To me, that indicates that she knows that her saying that she's going to be back on the internet frequently is not going to be a positive thing. The lip compression indicates a biting back of possible negative words or negative emotions or negative sentiments, something along those lines. Breaking of eye contact could indicate that she's not feeling comfortable holding eye contact with the lens at that time. And then the increased blinking also could be an indicator of blocking gestures. All of these to separate herself from the possible negative backlash that she was probably anticipating having. I think validly so. Let's continue.
I am a legal advocate. I am a researcher. I've been in the legal field since 2011. And in this capacity, I feel that it's necessary, if I'm going to continue to operate appropriately as a legal advocate, that I start to advocate for myself. And
all right, so we're going to go ahead and pause here. So she's now taken the PI approach that she had before, and now it's a new twist, and now she's a legal advocate for people, and now she's also saying that she's a legal advocate for herself. Many people don't frankly care that she's trying to advocate for herself. A lot of people are pretty frustrated by this approach. They're worried that it's a manipulation. And along with that, people are also not super gun-ho about having Casey Anthony be a legal advocate for them, considering her extensive history of deceit and overt lying, as well as the fact that, you know, she's possibly the murderer of her child. And so this is a fascinating step that Casey is taking here, and it seems as though it's largely centered around self-preservation, but perhaps also a need for attention, because again, nobody asked for this. Nobody wanted her to be on the internet. Nobody wanted her to make this TikTok. Nobody wanted this, but she's doing it, and it's a curiosity. At very minimum, it's a curiosity.
And also advocate for my daughter. For those of you who don't know, my name is Casey Anthony. My daughter is Caylee Anthony. My parents are George and Cindy Anthony. This is not...
right, so during that time, we see a little bit more aggression coming out here, and that makes sense to what she's introducing herself and all of the baggage behind that, but we're seeing that come in with some sharper movements, and the reiteration with the shaking of the head, yes, as well. That helps emphasize what she's saying. She's driving home a point as she's saying, I'm Casey Anthony, and you can see her head tilt ever so slightly, and this attitude is a little bit aggressive. Then what I also find fascinating is when she starts mentioning her parents, she has the same thing that she did before, where she breaks eye contact, looks away. With that, that lets me know, again, there's some sort of negative interaction there, which we heard earlier they have not been on speaking terms for very understandable reasons. And so we're seeing that reflected nonverbally here as well.
Anthony, this is not about them. This is not in response to anything that they have said or done. That's not to say that I'm not going to respond at some point to some of the things that they have said and done. The whole point of this is for me to begin to reintroduce myself.
Interesting. So she said, this isn't about what I'm not addressing things that they've said or done, but I will address things that they've said or done. So I'm assuming she's saying this video is not about things that they have said or done. And she also now has just admitted that this is about reinventing herself, which is many people are finding problematic again. But non-verbally speaking, with that, we see again a lot of these lip compressions, the biting back of negative sentiment or emotion or thought, feeling, words, what have you. We see those popping in there along with some prolonged eye blinks. Everything that she's saying here, she is doing an overt job at separating herself non-verbally from what she's saying verbally, indicates a level of defensiveness, which would make sense regardless of context, but we are able to get a little bit of a read on her nonverbal communication through this.
I'm doing this both personally for me, but in a professional capacity. Moving forward, the majority of what you will see will be me speaking in a professional capacity. My goal is to continue to help give a voice to people, to give people tools and resources that they can utilize so they actually know where they can turn to. So with that, please join.
Gonna go ahead and pause there again. Doing the reiteration of the head nods in there. So the micro head nods do push towards authenticity as she's saying these things, that she plans on doing these things. Head shakes, again, it is based out of this semi-aggression. You see, again, her neck being exposed. So when you see somebody exposing their neck here, this is vulnerable. You'll see it in all sorts of different ways. But as a neck is being exposed, it's showing that there's not a perception of risk. There's a level of, I don't feel at risk, so I can expose this vulnerable area. And this can be through a myriad of different means. It can happen in courtship where people might show their neck because they're interested in somebody and it's like, ah, kind of look. It could also be like a, oh. You can often see people raising their head when they're looking down at you. Again, it's all centered around this neck area. So we see her having some of those head tilts in there, which it doesn't seem as though she's trying to court us. So it is likely, again, centered around that attitude, that aggression, that conflict that's existing in there. She's feeling fairly combative towards the people that she's talking about, while at the same exact time trying to say that she's doing this to be able to be a benefit to the people that she's talking about, while also being a benefit to her. From what I'm understanding and just from her track record and everything like that, it probably is more so centered around it's going to be beneficial to her. But sure, let's allow her to have this. It will be beneficial to other people.
Please join me on Substack. If you have questions, I will set up an email address where we can correspond directly. Up until this point, that has never happened. And it's only going to be on a limited basis regarding legal issues, legal matters. One of the main reasons that I'm doing this, there are people close to me who have been targeted and attacked recently. There are also people close to me who have had some recent things occur. And when necessary, people needed to step up, myself included. So as a proponent for the LGBTQ community, for our legal community, women's rights, I feel that it's important that I use this platform that was thrust upon me and now look at as a blessing as opposed to the curse that it has been since 2008.
Gonna go ahead and pause here. I have difficulty, non-verbally speaking, we're seeing a lot of the same repeating patterns, a lot of the eye blinking or eye blocks and a lot of the lip compressions. We're seeing a lot of these same patterns repeatedly. It seems as though the same emotional vein is throughout it. What I am finding fascinating verbally during this is her now starting to try to say, oh, this was thrust upon me. I didn't have a choice. That's not true. She did not need to come and do this. Nobody asked her to. Nobody wanted her to. So her saying it was thrust upon me, this platform, I've gotta, that's manipulation. Along with that, she's also now trying to pull in other movements and people groups and whatnot that she hasn't really advocated for or been a part of in the past. And each of them are culturally significant ones, which lets me know, again, since she has no tangible evidence of her ever supporting these groups before, at least to the degree that she's saying now, and also knowing that they're very consequential ones in the public eye, it feels like these are used as, again, a manipulation point. Oh, I'm standing for these very good things to stand for. You can't be mad at me if I'm standing for these now. Don't ask how, but I am. I'm standing for these now, so just don't be mad at me. That's the energy that I'm getting from this. That's what I'm understanding from this. And this is extrapolating lightly off of what we're seeing here, because maybe in her personal life, she does deeply support these different people groups and movements, which I feel like should be supported, but I just don't see that from her. So it's questionable, and with her proclivity to just flippantly lie, I'm very suspicious at the very base level to start off with.
Since 2008. With that, these aren't going to be perfect. They're not going to be edited. Most of the time, they're not going to be short. But I am proverbially standing in the light, embracing this piece, still going to keep my privacy intact. So you will get very comfortable with my car, and I will explain in great detail why it's so important for people to protect their privacy. It's not just important to public figures, it's even more important to private individuals. And with the current climate in our country especially, it's that much more important, which is why I am utilizing the Substack platform. Yes, I am advertising this and publishing this on TikTok, possibly also through other meta platforms, but my intention is to separate from that and showcase even more why Substack is such an important resource for people to utilize moving forward. Anyway, I appreciate your time, and we'll see how this goes.
Okay, and that's the end of that. That's the end of the clip. Made her come back. At the point of researching this, she had only made a couple other text picture posts on her TikTok at the time, so there's not too much to go off of. We'll see how this goes indeed. At the end there, it does feel like she was just kind of fluffing out what she was saying there and giving a little bit more context perhaps. But again, the emotion behind it, we've talked about the patterns that we saw, the issues that we have, and at the very root, again, the difficulty is that she has shown that she will lie about anything possible if it benefits the way that she is perceived. And she did that repeatedly then, and there's zero reason for us to believe that she's not going to do that repeatedly now. It has to be really done through action, but even with that, this isn't the action that people are wanting. People aren't wanting her to now try to be a white knight hero. Like, that's not the transition that people are looking for, from most hated mom to white knight hero. It's most hated mom to let's just get you into not being the most hated mom and show that you're not worthy of that title. Let's get there and not get up onto any pedestal where people get to follow you and listen to you. Let's try to get those priorities straight. So let me know what your thoughts are about Casey's return to the internet. Considering everything that we heard in the background and story today, there's a lot to take in and think about, and this helped add a little bit of nonverbal context to what her mindset is in this step back in. So yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you would like to, I heavily suggest you go and check out Fume. I love mine. They're very nice. Again, it's such a clean, healthy alternative to some pretty negative habits that can easily formed, and so I really appreciate that. So if you would like to have that, especially if you have any sort of like fidget or oral fixation side of things, it's a great option for you, and it has some pretty good flavors. But without further ado, that's all that I've got for the day. My name is Logan, and you have been oh so awesome as you always are, and I will see you in the next video. Cheers, guys.